Welcome back, everybody. Another brew day in the books, so let's go over it. So today I brewed a raspberry ale. If you remember from last year or have watched my brew day videos, or in this case tasting, because I did not do a brew day video for it, I brewed a 1 gallon raspberry ale. Now this was not my recipe. I did get it from We Brews. They brewed it first. I took theirs because my wife wanted to try this. But what I did this time, we did a 5 gallon batch of this. So first off, I have never used Beersmith to, I guess, up the recipe. I've always brewed 5 gallon batches, or if I've done 1 gallon batches, I have not used that to scale up the batch. And well, I did on this one, so we went from 1 gallon to, let's say, 5.5, because that's what I have Beersmith set at. And some of the numbers were out of whack to me, so I just evened everything out. I think it told me for like the hops at 60 minutes to use 0.43 ounces, then in the, I don't know, the last 5 minutes to use 0.34 ounces. And so what I did, as you guys will see when we get to the hop section, I evened it off, 0.5 and 0.5. I wasn't going to deal with that. Also, the funny thing with this is, and again, I've never used the scaling, it went from 1 package of yeast up to 5 packages of yeast. So obviously when you scale a recipe in Beersmith, if you haven't before, make sure you take a look at how much yeast they want you to use. So before we get into this, if you did watch my pecan brown ale brew day video, I had some issues with my setup. Now, on my hot liquor tank and my mash tun, I did have 3/8 barbs on each one of them, and my new pump and the Therminator all used 1/2 inch. So I did purchase some new 1/2 inch barbs, quick disconnects, and I did update my mash tun and my hot liquor tank to those 1/2 inch quick disconnects, and I made a new section of 1/2 inch hose, so that way I could just, connect things, disconnect it, and keep going, and I wouldn't have to lift stuff and move stuff and do all this. So that's what I did do on this, and this might come, in a little bit later, as I did miss my final, wort level in the carboy. But let's go ahead and get into this. So here is the grain bill. And from my notes, and as you guys know, if you've watched some of my recent brew days, I will only give the percentage because everybody's system is different and you might have to scale to accommodate for your system. So 2-row is going to be 80.2%. White wheat malt is going to be 6.7%. And Crystal 20L is going to be 3.3%. So pretty easy, light colored in the color of it, and I don't think it's on here. Yeah. It's not on here. But so what Beersmith called for on this one for the mash in was 4.84 gallons of water. I went with 5. I'm not going to try and hit those numbers. I doubt most people will. I did heat that up. It wants us to mash, let's just say, 5 gallons of water at 154 degrees for 60 minutes. Now on this, if you remember from the pecan brown ale brew day, I had, my temperature was low, so even after I moved everything to the mash tun, my temperature was real low, so I had to heat up water. So on this one, I wanted to go with a higher temperature, so that way once everything got running, or if I messed up and had to do the same thing where I had to put my brew pot up top, put my mash tun below, and let it come out, I wouldn't have to heat up water. So I took this water almost up to 180 just so I didn't have to spend 20-30 minutes heating up a gallon plus of water and getting it back in there. So I went to about 180, and when I got it in there, I stirred everything. I was way over. I think once I got it all in there, because I did go in through the port, I want to say I was at 163, so I had almost 10 degrees to come down. So I did throw in a lot of ice in there. I did get it down to 154. It probably took, I don't know, 10 minutes or so to get it down there, 10-15 minutes. So then once I got it at that temperature, I did let it rest, as the recipe calls for an hour. After the hour, I did floor off. Once that became clear, I think I got 3.75 gallons of wort in my brew pot, and the first runnings were 18.75 bricks, or about 1077. So after that was all drained, and again, my system, I know when it's almost getting out, because you can start seeing grain come out the tube, and once that starts happening, I do close it and I go into my mash out. Now on this recipe, the mash out from Beersmith called for 4.63 gallons of water. I went with 5 again. Heated up the 5. I did move that to the hot liquor tank because obviously I couldn't floor off my first runnings and have the hot water in the brew pot. So once that was done, I did dump that in there. I stirred everything up, and I did let it sit for 15 minutes. If you remember the pecan brown ale brew day, I've been letting it sit after I stir it 15 minutes, then I start going. So after that was done, through the 15 minutes, I did floor off again, and once I started running clear, I put that into the pot. I did check that, and after 8 gallons, I was still above 6 bricks. So I did have more, but I was almost out of water. I didn't have very much left in the mash tun for the mash out, so I stopped it there, like I said, a little bit higher than 8 gallons to boil. Now, my pre-boil gravity through Beersmith was supposed to be 1049. I hit 1045, or 11.5 bricks. So I was 4 points under, but I have to say Beersmith wanted me to have 7.23 gallons in the brew pot before I started the boil, so I went with that. So the hops in this. So for the hops, we are going to do 0.5 ounces of Cascade at 60 minutes. Now, the alpha and beta levels are as follows. The alpha is 6.9 and the beta is 6.7. So we have half an ounce at 60 minutes and half an ounce at 5 minutes of the boil. So with 15 minutes left to go in the boil, I did add half a Whirlfloc tablet. Then after the 10 minutes, when it got down to 5 minutes left in the boil, I did add the half ounce of Cascade in there. And then at the end, flame out, what this recipe calls for, or what Beersmith scaled it to be, I should put 1 pound, 7.5 ounces of honey in there. But I did something a little bit different. I actually put, it was 1 pound in after I put the Cascade, the last step of Cascade. So 5 minutes left. And the only reason I did that, I was actually afraid that if I put that much honey in there, that it would get in the therminator and booger it all up. So I actually started dropping in little by little, from 5 minutes down to 0 minutes. And then that way, when it got to the therminator, I was thinking it should all be dissolved and I won't have a sticky mess. But one thing I want to talk about, a couple things actually. So after flame out and the honey was in there, I did start cooling it. And this time, as in the pecan brown ale, I did throttle the ball valve back on the outlet of the pump, so that way less water was running through the therminator and it would cool down faster. Well, let's say it cooled down a lot more, and when we get to it, I didn't pitch the yeast for 2 days, about a day. We'll go with a day. But I shouldn't say the funny thing, but the other thing about this beer is after I got everything into the carboy, I was at 5 gallons. Now, I started the boil with 8 gallons and I finished with 5 gallons. Now, I know I boil off about a gallon to a gallon and a half per hour. Now, I did have this going, I had it cranked up a little bit more, so I think I was at 6 gallons, and I can never remember to check to see what it is before I start cooling this down. But on this one, I think I was at 6 gallons before I started cooling down, and obviously when I got into the carboy, I was at 5 gallons. So I think in the future, what I'm going to do is actually set all my recipes up for 6 gallons and see how that works. I might do a simple smash beer or something like that to see if I can dial in my my post-boil level, because obviously in something like this, you're going to want 5.5 gallons, or that's what I always shoot for, so that way when I go into the carboy and then I put the yeast in there and all that, by the time I go to keg, I do have 5 gallons. Now on this one, for the yeast, we're using US-05 yeast, so no starter on this one at all. So post-boil gravity. Post-boil gravity was supposed to be 1074, and I came in at 16.5 bricks or 1068. So I was a little bit lower in the gravity, but I also didn't put in as much honey, and now that honey is going to boost that gravity, so I'm guessing that's why I'm lower. I added a pound instead of, what was it, 1.75 or 1 pound 7.5 ounces, so I'm guessing that would have made up also. I was lower in my final wort level than what I should have been. So I do think this is a learning experience, and I need to dial it in for the next one. So now what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is this will sit in primary fermentation for 14 days, let that yeast work all it can, and then what I'm going to do is, this calls for, and I'm going to use it, 7.32 pounds of raspberries. Now, if you do remember from the 1 gallon I made, what I did was I did get bags of raspberries. I heated them up on the stove, smashed them, and that's what I put into the carboy. That's the same thing I'm going to do here. It's just, it's going to take longer. I will fill up a pan as full as I can get it, heat them all up, so that way it kills any bugs or anything that's on there, and then I will put them in the carboy. Now on this, for the carboy, as you guys see in the picture, I did use a bucket, and what I was thinking that would be easier to dump them in, and I wouldn't have to use a filter or a funnel or anything like that. I also thought about just putting them in frozen, but I think in doing that with over 7 pounds, it would drop the temperature a lot. And so I'm just going to go ahead and do it like I did on the 1 gallon batch, and we will see how it turns out. It is bubbling away right now, so that's good. And we will be back for I will probably make a I wouldn't want to call it a secondary, but a video or short video when I do put the raspberries on it, and then we will have the tasting. But I think that's about it. Let me know if you guys have any questions on this one. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, you've only got 3 kinds of grains in the grain bill, then 1 hop, so it's not that bad. Obviously, the raspberries are a little bit more expensive to buy, but really, I don't think you can go wrong with this. It's, make the beer, put the honey in at the end, then 2 weeks later, throw in a whole bunch of raspberries, and hopefully it turns out like it did the first time, because it was very good. If you guys haven't watched those videos, go watch it. It was a neat color. The only thing I'm worried about on this one, as I was on the 1 gallon, is when I siphon it or transfer it to the keg, if I'm gonna get a lot of the meat or the seeds in the actual keg. What I'm guessing is I am gonna get some. I don't think you can get around it, but I think they'll all come out in the first glass. As most of you know, when you fill a keg, you let it carb up, let's say for 2-3 days, and you go to pour the first beer, most of it is the settlement that you got into the keg. So I think we'll be fine. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this brew day of the raspberry ale, and until next time, happy brewing. Thank you for watching this video. Thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Leave me a comment down below to tell me what you thought about this video. Also, don't forget to subscribe and share, and hit that bell so you know when new videos are coming out. You can check out these videos over here. Also, head over to 31stbrewing.com for everything beer and home brewing related.